Jerry Seinfeld said that PC crap has killed comedy.
Yeah.
And so we have Carollynn Xavier here, a professional comedian, to set the record straight today on the Next Simple Step podcast. What say you? Is comedy dead now due to the PC crap?
No, I think that if anything, it's going to swing back the other way and it's going to bust through PC stuff. Like, I think it's going to actually swing back too harsh. Like, you're seeing a lot of it in Austin. I'm, of course, in the clean comedy world, so I don't get exposed to much of the PC busting crap. But, well, PC, you mean just like certain things are off topic, right? Not like necessarily clean versus dirty.
For fear of getting canceled. You just offend the wrong person.
Yeah, I think it's gone way the other way, and it's on the trajectory to continue to go way the other way, where it's going to be like the more offensive, the better. People that bailed on New York and Los Angeles and moved to like Austin or Nashville or Huntsville or those areas, they're breaking through all of that.
Okay. You mentioned being a clean comedian. I have been a fan of Jim Gaffigan's for years, and now I'm a fan of yours. And Gaffigan's kind of addressed that because there's a stereotype that clean equals boring.
Yeah.
So what's your response to that? Do you feel like it is more challenging to stay clean and not go blue? Or is it that's just who you are and so it's second nature to you?
I have like this spiritual inkling towards like the purification of the heart. So even though in my personal life, I still laugh hysterically at the most disgraceful things, I've noticed in the last 5 years, my interest or entertainment level in that is more of a rejection of it now, which has been really interesting. And that's something that's just like God's doing on the inside. But in terms of, I say cleanish. There's a reason why I don't work in churches. It's because they want it sterile. And life isn't sterile.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be graphic and disgusting. That's true. I don't think comedy should be in the place where you preach and baptize and
stay in your lane.
Yeah. But then on the flip side of that, I mean, so many of these non-denominational churches are basically huge auditoriums and theaters. And I understand fun night out with the people you're doing laugh with in a church setting, but I just think doing it from the pulpit, the area where you preach, there's something like, where's the sanctity, the hallowed ground, like the reverence of that specific space that I really struggle with, which is one of the reasons why I don't do comedy in churches. The other reason is, I mean, I consider myself PG-13. Like, I don't know what I'm allowed to say on here.
You can say anything you'd like.
Okay. Yeah. But like, if I go into, like, let me think of a joke that I can't say in a church. I have a joke about just being 30 and gravity taking my gals, essentially. Like, they've just gone. And that joke is too dirty for churches. But it's like, that's real life. Yeah. That's what women in small groups giggle about when the men aren't around. And so just like being able to separate out, this is a real life experience. This is why it's funny and relatable versus this is just like some polished, I'm going to throw in a joke and be like, oh no, I guess I'm not doing well. Looks like I'm the Joba comedy. Like that whole, yeah, just like sprinkle in Bible references and then just call it a set and call it good isn't.
You are a Christian who does comedy, but not necessarily a Christian comedian making jokes just about church.
Yeah.
There's a big distinction there.
There's a huge distinction.
And you weren't always this way. I understand you grew up an atheist.
Yeah.
And man, you've had a lot of life change since the pandemic, as many of us have, right? People made changes for the better, maybe prioritize their health, their work-life balance. You took it to the next level. Like you became a Christian, moved across country, became known as a recovering California because you moved from California to Tennessee, took up keto and jujitsu. Like, did I miss anything? Like you just went all in on a bunch of things.
Yeah, I did go all in on a bunch of things. Well, keto and jujitsu started, I always joke, like, before you have Jesus, you have Joe Rogan. So it's like we're all looking for someone to like cling our identity and values. And this is why I live my life this way. And I kind of live and do this thing. And I think we are all kind of looking for someone to tell us not what's right or wrong, but like what is self-improvement? What's going to make us better? And I just hit it off with Joe Rogan 2018. I was a super overweight housewife. I was miserable. Nobody saw any value in me in my personal life. And I started listening to this guy that was just kind of funny, and he would talk about making your life better. And those things were keto and jujitsu. And so I think just like with Christianity, when you hear like, this is going to make my life better, it's like, okay, well, what are the actions to make this
How do I
happen?
do that?
And so it was kind of like, Joe's liturgical life is carnivore, keto, and jujitsu. And so I started doing those. I lost about 100 pounds
Wow.
within 8 months,
That's incredible.
which was wild.
Yeah.
And started to have self-worth in the places that I didn't know I was worthy because of i.e. upbringing or marriage or whatever was going on in my life. And that kind of transcended into, I love that this is a Christian podcast, so I can be hippy dippy because usually I can't be hippy dippy.
Well, just like I would draw the distinction that I am a Christian, but I wouldn't necessarily call this a Christian podcast. I feel like I'm a real person, that I have a faith, but also live in the real world. And so I don't think anything should be off limits. If it's your experience, you should be able to express it freely.
Yeah. Sometimes in this industry, it's a no. It's a tough one. It's a real struggle. I really appreciate you letting me talk about all of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
I think once I started to have self-value and self-worth, if you don't believe in Christ, you don't believe in yourself, you just are kind of this like lump on a log like I was, then you don't really get like messed with in a sense. But once I started to have self-worth, the self-worth quickly transcended into pride and ego. And so then I had started comedy. I was a dirty comedian. I was going through divorce. I started getting attention from men that I never had before because I was fit for the first time. And all of these kind of things were happening. And it was like, I didn't even realize that the devil was working behind the scenes. But I just became, I would say in less than a year of losing weight, getting divorced, stepping on a stage for the first time, I thought I was listening to the podcast, doing all of these things to be a better version of myself. But I became, unfortunately, on the flip, the worst version of myself. I was looking much better and feeling like I had worth in all of the wrong things. And I was looking for the worth in all of the wrong things. And so there was a lot of things that had happened in my personal life. My husband at that time was in the military, and he'd come back from deployment and he wasn't quite the same. And he had this, after we had split up, he had this big suicide attempt and was on life support. And there was all of like, just surrounded by, shrouded in evil. And just then the pandemic happened, and it was just like the worst version of me, the most broken version of me. And I just happened to be so desperate for change that I moved to the South. And because it is the Bible Belt, and that is kind of underneath everything that happens here, it was the first time I had really heard about Jesus. And so a completely new person sits in front of you today than you would have met 5 years ago. I mean, kind, patient, still a lot of work to do. But I mean, I went from being the fat housewife to the most like deplorable, disgusting human to now hopefully just, I think it's Psalms 50 says that God's with a humbled and broken spirit. And so now I'm hoping that this person in front of you is a humbled, broken spirit that's continuously trying to be better, but has a long way to go. If I was a book, I'm on page 1.
I think you're right as far as when somebody finds fitness, it can become all about that. At the end of the day, mind, body, and soul, it's all connected. So I think that you should take care of your body and mind, but ultimately the soul is the thing underneath you need to foster, and ego is the greatest enemy. And so whatever you fixate on becomes your idol. And for some people, that's food, and other people, that's fitness, or you just name it. Anything, even good things, can become idols. In fact, often they do, because it's obvious becoming an alcoholic is not good for you, and drinking a lot, but becoming super healthy and physically fit looks positive, but it can become a negative if that becomes your whole being.
Yeah. It was like, this is the only measurement of success I have in some way or another. The whole fitness industry can be like that, where because especially in the like quote unquote influencer world that I'm kind of a part of, and knowing fitness influencers and how when you see behind the curtain a little bit, it's not as clean and as polished as you would think. And a lot of it is rooted in vanity, just like comedy. I mean, comedy for me, when I first started, it was all about just like accolades and attention and being told that I was worth anything to anyone. And now, I mean, I don't know if you know this or not, but some people do, not very many, that I'm leaving stand up.
Hmm.
In March is my last date. And it's mostly because I shouldn't say I don't need, because I feel like a passion or a sin is never truly conquered until death. But I don't need attention anymore. And I don't want to be on a stage where, how can I say it? It's hard to explain. Well, one, it's a million different facets.
Well, literally, you're on stage and people are applauding you. So you're trying to have this humble posture, and how you reconcile that with, being on stage and have people applaud you, or being an influencer and have people love your post and say you're awesome. That is really dangerous and challenging for the soul. And it sounds like that's how you're handling it. You're stepping down from what you're known for. That's incredible. And that means truly that hasn't become your whole identity, that you're okay stepping away. First you had TikTok, and now it's more Instagram, YouTube. How you manage that as well as becoming this digital influencer, personality person. How do you handle that and stay humble?
Okay, a good example is yesterday I did a corporate gig, and whatever, I show up, I do my 30 minutes. Good job. Go. And I think that's so funny, because I feel like when you're in a state where you're oriented towards Christ, those things just fall off. Okay, people said I did a great job. That's really sweet. It was a paycheck. I'm glad they had a good time. Mm-hmm. Done deal. I had a really difficult conversation on the phone after that attacked my ego, my self-worth, and kind of really tapped into some deep insecurities that I still have a lot of healing to do. And I stopped at a gas station, like 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Mm-hmm. And I walk into this gas station, middle of nowhere. Like out past Centerville, middle of nowhere, Tennessee. And people in Centerville are like, we're not middle of nowhere. How dare you? But just way out. And I walked in, and I was coming out of the restroom, and this guy goes, how's the tour going? And because I was in a state of being away from Christ, feeling insecure, feeling like I wasn't enough in some sense because of the conversation I had just had, that how's the tour going, getting recognized at a gas station in the middle of the night, was like a shot of heroin. Mm. It was like, oh yeah, this feels good. I am worth something. Right. Screw you, person on the phone. Mm-hmm. I am something. And I think that's where the danger is, because it's really easy to be in your beautiful podcast studio and feel really safe and be like, oh, I just love Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so both of feeling like I don't need that attention, so I can conceptualize and comprehend, hey, I don't need this anymore and I can walk away from this, is great. It sounds noble. But the bigger fear is staying in it and needing that, like those times where you feel insecure. And it's a habit that took about 6 months to break. But when I would be in a situation as little as having a bad interaction with somebody at a grocery store, to seeing maybe hearing good news about somebody that I didn't particularly favor, my brain would automatically go to, you got to open up Instagram or TikTok, because you'll feel good about yourself there. Like there's the instant gratification, instant like, hey, you're so funny, you're so this, you're so that. So about 6 months ago, I got signed by a social media company, and I just put it down. And I mean, occasionally I'll look at the messages. I don't consume it, but I think the good is just as heartbreaking and mentally challenging and spirit breaking as the bad. I would even say that the good is more dangerous because if I start to believe that I am this great thing, that I'm this separate thing from everybody else, that I'm so gifted, blah, 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 so talented, all the nonsense people tell you, I feel like the trap of pride is so much easier for anyone in this type of industry than it's easy to be like, oh, well, that guy's just, I'm not going to cuss. That guy's just a jerk
Right.
because he said the mean thing to me or whatever.
What you're saying is healthy boundaries. And I just had this quote in my office that says, boundaries are like fences. They keep out what you don't want and protect what you value. Dr. Henry Cloud. I think that's exactly what you're saying. You're putting boundaries between yourself and that which is going to trip you up.
Yeah. Which again, it's easy to sit in here where it's cozy and warm
Right.
and be like, yeah, I'm getting off stage and I'm doing all these things to try to stay humble. Like, it sounds great, but in reality, like, it's because it's a legitimate pitfall. It's beautiful that I'm not so desperate for attention anymore that I can just walk away from it. It's also still a temptation that's there and is probably going to always be there. Like, I can't get off social media permanently because of financial reasons. Like,
It's your business.
It's my business.
Right.
And so is there a part of me that would love to just hide out in the mountains and disappear to a monastery and be a mom and a wife, and not that there's monasteries for moms and wives, but make my own house like a life of asceticism? Absolutely. But financial reasons, and my husband's a comedian, and all of like these other things that are going on is why I'm still tied to the social media. But I really feel like getting off the stage and stop doing the live shows. Also, I mean, I'm so sorry that I feel like I've hijacked this, but I have crippling stage fright.
Wow.
Which is something that I don't know how many.
That's ironic. As a comedian, right, you wouldn't think that stage fright would be a thing.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty prevalent, I would say. A comedian that I'm a big fan of and I've gotten the chance to work with a few times, John Reep, he said even 20, 30 years in, however far in he is, he was like, I still get nervous until that first laugh. Because that first laugh is acceptance. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's, are they going to reject me? Are they going to like me?
Naked, vulnerable. Yeah. Like, is this going to work out or are they going to not like me?
Yeah, are you going to like me? Are you going to like me?
Huge ego challenge. You mentioned being married to a comedian. You're a newlywed, actually, Brent Blakeney. You guys just moved to a tiny home. So like lots of change. Well, first of all, you're both comedians in this tiny home. I have to ask, which one of you is funnier?
Oh my gosh. Okay, we have different strengths. We definitely have different strengths. Okay, so he is 1,000,000,000% 1,000 times funnier than me on stage. In person, in front of you, I'm the funnier one. So it's like his strength is really the performance, the writing aspect of it, just locking into, I'm Brent Blakeney on stage right now. And then I hate that. I hate the performance. I hate repeating the same set every night. Like, that's not something I really enjoy. It's not something I'm particularly great at. And so I'm like this. Like, I love just sitting around with people and being funny and laughing about stuff and getting to know people. So he's also more of the diehard creative, and I have more of like a business mindset.
Yeah.
So like, it's so funny because we've created these characters now where I actually do manage him in real life now with my new job. We've had this character for years, Kathy. So when he has questions about management side, he'll call Kathy. And like, we picture Kathy as like some old manager, like, I'm gonna make you a star, kid. Like that old lady that probably smokes, I don't know, 3 packs a day of Marlboros or whatever.
Right. I want to ask about that because my wife and I are about to celebrate our 20th anniversary.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. And we didn't start working together until about 5 years ago. So we had 15 years of figuring out this marriage thing and being parents before we started working together. And it's still really challenging because now we own a couple of businesses, Salad Works and Burn Boot Camp Gym, and it's stressful. And we're figuring that out. together, but it's a new level of stress working together versus being married and having separate careers. So how has that been for you? Because from day one, you're both comedians, you're working together. Now you're managing your new husband. Yeah. How is that? And how do you manage that stress? And when do you turn it off? And like, okay, we're just going to be husband and wife now and not be professional comedians.
Right. I'm not going to say it's perfect or it ever comes out perfect, but basically our strategy is your quote, the boundaries. Mm-hmm. So we have business hours. So like Brent is not allowed to talk to me about work anything after 4 p.m. unless we are inside of a comedy club is our rule. And it's so silly, but we actually we pencil each other in and do business meetings. So like, for instance, when I leave here today, I'm going to Chattanooga because he's on this comedy festival. And tomorrow I'm on the comedy festival as like this headliner panel for questions. And so it's so funny because we're like, oh, we're both going to be at this place together. So we scheduled, even though we're staying in the same hotel, we scheduled coffee together to go out. And that's a big thing too, is having the meetings outside of the house, I've noticed, because it's like, if you and I are business partners, and maybe you guys do something similar, but if you and I are business partners and I'm like doing the dishes or laundry while you're trying to talk to me, you'd be like, oh, well, this person doesn't care about what I'm saying at all. So dedicated time, 100%, as if we're not married. But then there is this nice element that we save for the end of the manager meetings, where it's like time for the husband and wife to talk. Like, okay, we just went through all this stuff as business partners. Now let's take a little bit of time and see where our marriage aligns with that, where our future aligns with that, where spiritually we align with that. And it's just kind of always this like push and pull, but boundaries and actually scheduling, like they're a real person that do not live with you.
That's smart. And I think, well, it's as American as apple pie is to complain about your boss. So where does Brent go to complain about his boss then?
Yeah. Well, she sucks. So she's a real brutal. We have to have some really uncomfortable conversations. And I am way more confrontational than Brent. So I'll be like, he'll have a set that's everybody's like, you did so great. And I'm like, I've seen you do better. Like, you can do better than that. And he'll tell me like, you know what? This isn't all logistical. It's not all logistical. It's not just a business transaction. Like, you're forgetting that you love this as an art. And I have to like recenter myself and be like, oh yeah, I do love comedy as an art. It's not just a business transaction. And so sometimes you have to be really brutal. We had a brutal conversation yesterday where he needed the wife's, what does my wife say and what does my manager say? He had this, it was like a lightning round where it's like 1 minute, really fast jokes. And he was like, since I'm not touring with you anymore, because I'm getting off the road, his style before touring with me wasn't this super clean, Southern, nice, pretty box. He would tackle ideas and thoughts and political thoughts and ideologies that were much stuff I wouldn't touch because it's not on brand for me. And he was like, hey, I want to bring this joke back. And I had to be like, okay, well, that joke is about stuff that doesn't really align with us spiritually. What is your husband thoughts on that? And then I had to consider his husband thoughts. He had to consider my wife thoughts on, is this something that you want to profess into a microphone to a crowd of people? Does this normalize it? And so sometimes it does get, and I'm sure with you guys too, it overlaps.
Absolutely. I mean, it can get really messy. So the boundaries is critical there. And like you said, you're wearing the husband hat or the wife hat as opposed to the business manager and client hat. It's really important to just draw which kind of conversation we're having so the lines don't get even more blurred.
Yeah, it works out perfect because we already had Kathy set up.
Right.
So he'll be like, hey, can I talk to Kathy?
That's awesome. And you have in the mix a teenage son.
Oh, yeah, we do have him.
There's that.
He's the joy.
Does he find you funny?
No.
No, you're just mom.
You know what? It really sucks. And I mean it like it sucks as like this is the ego part. You always want to be the funniest person in the room. He's funnier than me.
Oh, wow. No,
it hurts. Like, dang, you're funnier than me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so what does he think of all of this and your new tiny home in the middle of the woods? Like, yeah, how does he, what does he think of that?
He has how would I explain his personality? He is so easygoing and go
Hmm.
with the flow. And as long as he feels like whatever, I always like joke in our own house, like he's going to be a monk or a priest or
Hmm.
something, but he has this kindness about him where if whatever we're doing glorifies Christ in some way, he loses his selfish aspects that most teenagers would have. I mean, it surpassed anything that I'm capable of. Because I feel like most teenagers would be like, I have these weird hippie parents. They're both comedians. Now we live in a tiny house in the woods. Like, what are we doing? It's terrible to heat. Is there even electricity here? This is, you're crazy.
Right.
And he's just so easygoing. I mean, he goes to a Christian school that's more college based. It's not so much about memorize this, it's more about making long-term critical thinkers. So instead of, hey, the War of 1812 happened in 1812, their thoughts more are like, why did the war happen? How could we keep it from happening again? And so they'll have like an assignment instead of like memorize this and take this test would be, I don't know, pick a historical time. If you're in Constantinople in whatever, 600, write a letter as a prison guard
Hmm.
to a prisoner or like something like think in a creative way, use your creative thoughts. And so whatever kind of school that is that he fits in so well, his main mode of thinking is that too. So it's like, how does this benefit my family long term? How does this benefit me long term? It's outside the norms of what society would say, but I want to be outside the norms of what society would say is like a normal quote unquote life. And so he's very much like follow, I'm not going to say follow your creative, but like follow whatever package gets you closer to Christ.
Well, he's critically thinking about things and not just taking what you're told at face value. Like, how does this reflect my own view of the world and my view of God? And what's my role in that rather than just kind of taking everything as it comes and as you're told?
Yeah.
That's
And
really cool. Did you go to a private school yourself, or you're a product of the California public school system? Is that
no, I am a product of only went to sixth grade,
okay?
only went to sixth grade, took my GED, I think at 20, was told my whole public school life that I was like special needs and I was in all the special ed classes and that I couldn't read and all of these things. But it turned out I was just dyslexic.
That's awful.
Yeah. So thank God that I was born at the time I was born where there's audiobooks. And so like everything all self-taught because I mean, only went to sixth grade. I dabbled in middle school a little, never graduated anything officially. And then I think I was in high school for like maybe a month, but they were like, you're like 4 years behind, whatever, and moved around a lot. And so there wasn't a lot of stability, which is so funny because then on the flip side, my husband has like a master's degree in philosophy.
Incredible.
And so we
Wow.
always like joke back and forth and I'll be like, sometimes he'll say big words and I'll be like, hi, what exactly, you want to give me a good definition or bring it down to GED level? But yeah, so my school experience, which thank God that Brent's in my life because he puts a big value on education. And because I've gotten as far as I have had with challenges and no education, I have like a obscure version of this. I sound like I'm going to sound a little QAnon, but this like factory worker model of, because I remember like it's so silly and hacky, but like when I was a little kid, I wanted to color outside the lines and they're like, no, you have to color inside the lines. And I was like, I don't want to do that. Like I want to add like an ocean and I want to add the sky and I want to make it a prettier picture. And they're like, that's not what the task is.
Right.
Yeah, which maybe has hurt me in the long run because I'm terrible about listening to what other people want potentially.
It seems to be working for you. I think as a creative, that is your job to color outside the lines, to look for a different way of seeing things. And instead of just following the mold. And I have strong opinions on that as well. of far as, how school was designed to create factory workers. So I do tell my kids, like, if you can Google it, you don't need to memorize it.
Thank you. Yes.
That's kind of the point. And so,
way to go, Dad.
well, they still go to public schools. So we'll see how it turns out. But at least that's what I challenge them. I'm like, I'm not worried about you memorizing anything. It really is, can you think for yourself and try to see things from different perspectives? And you actually have to do a little bit deeper dive than just to believe everything in the book, because that's one perspective. That's at least the goal. I think with AI, we're doing ourselves a disservice by not trying to foster more creativity. And how can I connect with other people, think for myself, and be able to work with other people and collaborate and make stuff?
Yeah, there's all these tools to do the legwork for us.
Mm-hmm.
And the schools are still like, no, you need to learn this. Like, I am so excited for the boom of, there's a long-standing history of successful dyslexics, but my son's dyslexic as well. And like the tools at your fingertips now, where it's almost like, okay, well, now you have this gift that your information goes in the wrong hemisphere of your brain first, but you have all of this technology tooling to pick up the slack of the other side of the brain that's not engaged in everything properly, like spelling, grammar, all those things. It's like, I'm not going to sit here. I would get crucified if people were like, I sat here and I'm like, you don't need to teach kids how to use commas. Who the heck uses commas anyways?
Uh-huh.
But just not having to feel stupid because a big percentage of the population can't understand or comprehend those things. And then just having like, I'm so excited to see what the future holds for creatives, like you're saying, because it's going to be like this epic boom of creativity, or we're all going to be starving artists, but we'll be in cardboard boxes together.
I do like to think about that. You're halfway there, but
yeah, I know. Well, hey, it's an aluminum box.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. I didn't mean to offend your dwellings. But I do think about that a ton, because what do we do when most of the jobs are irrelevant because machine learning can handle most of the jobs? And if somebody isn't particularly skilled with their hands like me, like I cannot become a home builder because that's not a skill I can do. So what do we do with our time? Be creative. I went on my own entrepreneurial journey in 2017. I hear from all these friends who are asking, like, how did you do that? And they're like, well, I feel like most people are born with certain talents and different talents and abilities, but they get stifled by the school system or by a parent that's not supportive. It's just not fostered. And I feel like a lot of people are harboring some resentment, later in life, into old age, because they never got to express that creativity. It doesn't necessarily have to be economic. You don't have to make a job out of it. But I'm like, life is too short. If God's put some sort of passion and talent in your heart, you should go see where that goes. And really, can you take the next simple step? And so I'd ask you, what encouragement would you give to somebody, whether they always wanted to try stand-up or some other creative pursuit? It doesn't have to be that. It's maybe let's play a musical instrument or start their own company. They've got this desire, but they're just afraid because they put themselves out there. It might not work. People will judge them. It's not who they are or who they've built themselves up to be. There's all of these voice of fear that just keeps it back. And so they never take that leap. What encouragement would you give them?
I would say you're going to suck at it. You're going to be probably the worst. And you're probably going to be the worst a few times. Whether it's stand-up, it's a business. The first 800 times you get on stage, you might fail. The first 20 businesses you open might fail. But I feel like failure is your perspective. Like if we went all the way back to when I first started stand-up, I suck at it. If you look through some people's eyes now, I still suck at it. And it's like, there's a difference between a 5-year stand-up like me and a 25-year stand-up. And you can see the polish, the refinement, the fail, that doesn't work, get back up. That fail, doesn't work, get back up. And that never quitting, like the perseverance. And I've also had failed businesses. I feel like there's like this idea in my generation where like, and especially I see it in my son's generation, where what they see online is the end product, the successful person, the person that
Polished.
did it, that's
Right.
polished, that made it. And I feel like maybe they don't see enough of the, like that, they always say in stand up, like, oh yeah, I was an overnight 20-year success.
And in music and lots of
Everything. Yeah.
pursuits, overnight success. It takes time. And failure is feedback.
Yeah.
And there's this tool I was just using today. I'm in this program called Strategic Coach for entrepreneurs. And I just love this tool. I was filling one out today. I have this paper on my desk. It's called the Experience Transformer. And it's like you write down, literally briefly describe the experience you'd like to improve and learn from. So a failure.
Yeah.
And I was writing one down. And then next it's what worked and then what didn't. But then what are you going to do with that information? That's are you going to persevere? What are you going to do better next time? What are you going to change? What do you need to learn? What needs to happen next? Don't just stop there like, well, I suck and that didn't work and people hate me. It's like,
that's what people do.
Like persevere. That's where the work begins. And like, you actually have to get back up again.
I think it's kind of like, in therapy, they always say small T traumas and big T traumas. I feel like there's small F failures. Like I didn't do this properly, or this business failed, or I sucked on stage, or I'm terrible at guitar, or whatever. Those are like small F failures. The only big F failure is if you don't actually try it. Like that's a resentment towards yourself that you might carry for life. I mean, I think about how much growth I've had being in uncomfortable situations and continuously putting myself in uncomfortable situations to try to see if I could get on the other side of it. And I'd hate to say it, but I feel like the Stoics are so right in so many things. And it's really like you have this plan. It's not going to go as planned. It's probably going to suck. It's going to be painful. But the beauty is in the pain, not in the reward. Because I can say that from other comedians' perspectives that are at my level or below my level, it seems like, well, I don't understand. She was funny on the internet and then she just got all of these things handed to her. Or people will be like, I can't believe she's leaving comedy because she has all these doors open to her. But it's like, if you would have told me 3 years ago, you're going to have whatever across all the things, 500,000 followers and be able to sell out comedy clubs, I'd be like, you're crazy. And I would love that. And I got there and the emptiness at that space was equally as empty. And the yearning and wanting for the next thing was equal. None of that had changed. But who I was from then to now, because of the painful process to get this far, is worth everything. That's the reward.
Yeah, to quote the philosopher Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
I think that's so true.
Yeah. Or until they bite their ear off or whatever.
Right. Yeah. That's really wise perspective there, because you climb to the top of the ladder and realize you're up against the wrong wall. You got to climb back down and find a new ladder to climb. So you're stepping down from comedy, or at least stand-up comedy. You've got this podcast with your husband, Brent, refried avocados. Yeah. Where are you going with that? And what's next for you when you stop performing?
Yeah. Okay. So I know it sounds so silly. If I had it my way, like I said, I would just disappear into the mountains. But there's this beautiful movie called Man of God. If you ever get a chance to watch it, it's great. And it's about this wonderful man, Saint Nectarios. And he had a lot of struggles, significantly bigger than any struggle I've ever experienced. And he wanted to just disappear into a monastery. And they said, God's gifted you with your writings. You can't just disappear. And I think what you said earlier about if you have this gifting that you can feel, not from a place of pride, but I do have a way with people when I interact with them that I know when I leave, they're a little bit happier. And that's none of my own doing. That's whatever, when God's sprinkling out gifts, that was one I was blessed enough to get, to just, whether it's the Starbucks lady or the cashier at Wendy's, whoever, I just want to make sure that I left them. It's going to make me tear up because that's really the joy, right? Is I use these quirky personality and jokes to leave them in a better state than I found them. When it's just a crowd full of people, it's like, I'm not going to say meaningless, but not as impactful.
It's less personal.
Yeah, it's less personal is a perfect way to say it. Or online, I don't look at the comments. I don't see the likes. I don't see any of that. That's somebody else's job. So that one-on-one, if somebody like just has like a down day and you just say something so goofy and so off the wall and it just like totally brightens their day, it's like, oh, that's a little piece of Christ light that I was lucky enough to carry with me and blessed enough to carry with me that I could leave with somebody else. And so I'm not going to run to the woods into a monastery, but I am going to definitely take a step back and kind of reevaluate who I am, where I am on my spiritual journey, and how I can best deliver that message from the place I am now without steering people the wrong direction because I'm immature in my faith. So I would like to maybe at some point write a book and start talking to youth groups about, growing up in LA around a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol and having a pretty rough upbringing and how you can get through that and you can navigate all of those things. But I don't want it to be something that is monetized. So I have to continue forth with podcasting and monetizing my jokes to hopefully get to a place where I could really do some sort of work that isn't tied to money, that I'm like, this is where this can be my hill in the woods of sanctity and peace and God's joy. That because I have some fears where early on, a few years ago, I would go and talk to youth groups, but it was more of like using my gifts for financial means. And I don't want to be in that situation. So long story short, refried avocados will continue. His touring schedule and my touring schedule are so crazy. And then moving was insanity. And so I'm hoping that it becomes what it's meant to be and is something that people really enjoy. But I feel like it's kind of a mess. Like podcasting is kind of a mess. And I am always hitting him with too many ideas. And this last one, I was like, let's do it as a book club because that'll be fun.
Yeah.
And it'll be like we can have, but then I realized the problem is I love hearing him talk. I could listen to him talk all day. I could give a crap less what I have to say. So now there's this struggle where I'm like, oh, I want to know what the audience thinks of the book. And I don't know how to mix them into that. And so it might need some rebranding and retooling. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. I love that. My wife always gets invited to book clubs, but I never do. And I'm the reader. Like, I love this is my deepest desires that I get invited to a book club. So I need to follow your book club because what book are you
doing right
reading?
now?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of a mess. Okay, so we moved into the tiny house because we're following Dave Ramsey's financial plan. I messed around with Satan AE Visa and I got myself into some credit card debt. Brent has student loans. So we were like, I want to walk away from stand-up. That's the bulk of my income. And so I'm like, I need to redo some things. So we're doing the crazy tiny house. We call it La Petite Mansion. La Petite. And so alongside that, we were going to do George Campbell's book, which is one of the newer Ramsey books called Breaking Free from Baroque. It's really great. I love the audio version. He made it like a podcast. It's so funny. It's so great. And that one is a Patreon. And then more of like a self-improvement, creativity, all that. We're doing, is it The Art of Creativity by Rick Rubin?
Oh, yeah.
Dyslexia is getting me. Yes, exactly. Exactly. The creative act.
I've got it right here, so I'm in.
You're in. Yeah. Okay. So I will say selfishly.
Every page is like this gold mine of creative inspiration. Like that's not a normal book.
It's not a normal book, but it's so funny because in the relationship, I am the hippy dippy spiritual. Like I'm Eastern Orthodox, which if you dug around, I'm sure you figured that out. So I am way more like hippy dippy spiritual than Brent. And this book, the first couple pages was too hippy dippy spiritual for me. And I was like, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to do this? And then I realized I was just being completely closed-minded to the ideas of this book. And it reminds me a little bit of, is it The Art of War? No, The War of Art.
Yes.
Yeah, with the muse and kind of like where does this creativity element thing kind of come from and how do we tap into it and all of that kind of stuff. And I've really enjoyed it so far because of the La Petite Mansion move. We haven't picked it up in about 3 weeks. And so
there's still time to dig in and get in the plug.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I'm excited.
The first one we did was Ryan Holiday, one of Ryan Holiday's Stoicism books. And Brent was so grumpy. He was like, this could have been a pamphlet. And I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. I love this. And, but I think with his philosophy background, he's probably like, I know this. What are we doing? Like, I guess, I don't know.
Well, Holiday's made quite a career of it.
Oh, yeah.
The Obstacle's the Way and all of them.
Yeah, that was the first one we read.
Yeah.
The Obstacle's the Way.
Yeah.
And then we have the Ego one. But I also love his podcast so much too.
I haven't listened to it.
His podcast's great. But again, it's like anything where you can only take in so much.
Right.
So we got to get on this. And then if you have any toolings or ideas to rebrand, you let me know.
Okay. Well, I think you're doing just fine without my help, but I love it. Carollynn Xavier, thank you so much. And I'd encourage anybody to do what I'm going to do is find a show to see before you give up stand up for good. I definitely need to see the live shows. So
yeah, I'm so glad we found each other on an airplane at 6 a.m.
Never know who you'll meet on the airplane. Not always somebody you want to invite on the podcast, but this time it turned out. Thank you so much for listening and joining us today. I'll talk to you next time on the next Simple Step Podcast.